regular Gurnee Village Board meeting of March 23rd, 2020 to order. Roll call, please, Andy.
Balmas.
Present.
Hood.
Here.
Thorstensen.
Here.
Ross.
Here.
Garner.
Here.
O'Brien.
Present.
6 present.
All right, please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, so tonight, for the sake of social distancing and our own safety and trying to get us back to our families, we're going to go through the agenda as quickly as possible. So there'll be some things that I'll breeze through. I'd also like to say thank you to Pat's leadership for the last week and our department heads. I know how stressful and anxious our residents are in our businesses, but I also know our employees are, and they've put it aside, and they step up for the community in many, many ways. I know they are putting their own safety at risk to some extent, even though we know this is public service, but I know Pat has really done a lot this week to keep the village running and be respectful of the concerns of our employees. So please thank your teams for staying in here with us and continuing to serve the community. It does send a really powerful message to our residents and our businesses that we are out there and we're serving right now. So it gives some small sense of normalcy in a world that has gone completely mad for all of us. So thank you.
And I would just say it's a team effort. It's changing day by day, and the departments have been rolling with it and doing what they can to adjust schedules. Some different things with the workforce that you hear about here from Chief Smith and Chief Kavanaugh. So it's definitely a team effort and a very fluid situation. So.
Yep, like I keep saying, flying by the seat of our pants with no roadmap. All right, so first item is approval of the consent agenda as presented.
moved.
Motion by trustee
Second.
Balmas, second by trustee O'Brien. Roll call, please.
Balmas.
Aye.
Hood.
Yes.
Thorstensen. Yes. Ross.
Aye.
Garner.
Aye.
O'Brien.
Aye.
All right, motion carries. Pat, please read the consent agenda into the record.
Item number 1, approval of the minutes from the March 2nd, 2020 Village Board meeting. Item number 2, approval of ordinance 2020-15, approving and publishing the official zoning map of the Village of Gurnee. Item number 3, approval of ordinance 2020-16, authorizing the execution of the First Amendment to a ground lease and the First Amendment to memorandum of ground lease between the Village of Gurnee and Vogue Tower 1 LLC. Item number 4, approval of resolution 2020-03, approving a contract with MC Squared Energy Services for the provision of electricity for pump stations. Item number 5, approval of Information System Division's recommendation to award 2020 Network Equipment Project number 1 to the low bidder, CDWG, at a cost of $43,358.34. Item number 6, approval of Public Works Department's recommendation to award the 2020 and 2021 mowing and landscape maintenance of Class B sites to Siebert Landscape at an annual cost of $76,392. Item number 7, approval of payroll for period ending February 28, 2020 in the amount of $852,825.77. Item number 8, approval of payroll for period ending March 13, 2020 in the amount of $838,622.71. Item number 9, approval of bills for period ending March 23, 2020 in the amount of $1,741,994.56.
Thank you, Patrick. Do I have a motion to approve the consent
moved.
agenda? Motion by trustee Balmas, second by trustee Garner. Roll call, please.
Balmas.
Aye.
Hood.
Yes.
Thorstensen. Ross.
Aye.
Garner.
Aye.
O'Brien.
Aye.
6 aye.
All right, we're going to move on to petitions and communications, and for the sake of these times that we were in and not to minimize their importance, I am just going to ask for a motion to approve a proclamation making April 2020 our Fair Housing Month. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Motion by trustee O'Brien, second by trustee Garner. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay. And then our second proclamation is Alcohol Awareness Month for April 2020. Do I have a motion to approve? Motion by trustee Garner, second by trustee Thorstenston. I'm sorry. I'm, this is a testing coordination too tonight. All right, I have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, and then we have a reminder that our budget hearing is at 6:40 PM on April 6th. Depending on how the next week goes, we may or may not do that in person.
As of right now, so we will, we'll see how the next week proceeds and then see if we're going to do that electronically or if we're going to do it in person.
Yeah, there's some complications with trying to do a public meeting by Zoom or WebEx, but we'll see how it goes. This actually is kind of nice here tonight, all spread out, so, but we want to keep everybody safe. All right, we're going to move on to reports. The first one is from our finance director, Brian Gosnell. This is about our third quarter financials, but Pat and I and Brian had talked at length earlier this week about some concerns with economic conditions. So I thought it was a good time for Brian to walk us through some contingency plans we already have in place as this starts playing out. So Brian, the floor is all yours.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to hit a few slides here on the third quarter report, so ending January 31st, 2020. I won't take up a lot of time because it's literally all changed and almost irrelevant as based on what happened over the last month or so here. Cash and investments totaled just over $31.5 million, 71% general fund, 16% water and sewer. We have it in a mix of checking, money markets, and the short-term fixed income with Schwab. Just on a liquidity note, because I know that's a hot topic these days, everything but the Schwab account can be accessed within a day. So fairly liquid as far as where we have our money. And then the 91-day T-bill and the village portfolio flip-flopped here with obviously rates moving down. Village portfolio still earning 1.76, and then versus 91-day T-bill of 1.55. Looking at major revenues in the general fund here, sales tax was just off with home rule sales tax being just a little more off through January. We saw that accelerate through March. We got the holiday sales in. They were off about 1.3% for sales tax and about 3% for home rule sales tax. Difference there just being how like autos and groceries taxed. So you see a little difference there. Expect that to carry through the end of the year. It looks like we'll miss our budget mark, so we figured that in the year-end estimates when we went through the budget. Amusement tax here, just to point out a couple variances here. Versus last year, it's down, up versus budget. That's because we had a one-time payment last year. Telecom is the same thing, but that's a one-time payment this year. And then building permits, obviously the timing and what happens in the fourth quarter here, we may not make that up, no matter how many projects come in. So that will likely end in a negative variance for the year. General fund revenues total 75.98% of budget, again 75% of the way through the year. Mostly all timing with a couple exceptions. In the intergovernmental, you see that's the timing of the SAFER grant. We apply for those on a quarterly basis. Fines and forfeitures, this is not a timing issue. Police fines are down. And talking with Chief Smith, it's based on what is actually being prosecuted and what's not, or what's being thrown out, and it seems like there's more and more of those lately. On the investment side, banking services, obviously we went through that process. Higher investment income offset by lower fees, or higher fees, again, excuse me, those two move in the same direction. And then other sources, here you see a large variance. That's because we budgeted for the use of reserves to pay off the Series 2011 bonds. So you'll see that large variance there. Expenditure side, 78.07% of budget. Again, mostly all timing still. The one place we see that will carry through the end of the year at least, looks like overtime in the fire department. Obviously, we had some staffing things going on out there, and then probably a little bit in the police department as well. So, on the water side, water sales are off about 4% through January, and we see that carry through. So, you'll see a positive variance here in the charges for service. That's because two bills actually posted to January, but when we take that out through the end of the year, we do expect that to be off budget. And then on the expenditure side in the water fund, really the only variance of note here is And the employee benefits at 85.5%, and that's just the work comp premium that hits that one. So other than overtime, water sales, not a lot of things that make a big difference, mostly timing things. Obviously, that's going to totally change in the fourth quarter. So we'll move on from there, but all in all, I mean, third quarter's ended up where we saw it trending, so, and where we plugged it into the proposed budget, so not a whole lot of surprises. Questions on the third quarter? We'll move into probably the more important part here. Sorry, go ahead.
How did Six Flags do this year with the December?
They were up almost, I want to say, around 6-7% on the year. And we saw that in the positive variance versus budget, negative versus last year, because we had a large payment, almost double what the negative variance was versus last year, so it was a good year.
But
Obviously, looking at kind of the current economic environment here, obviously the COVID-19 crisis, just looking through what the response is here and how that impacts the village on the federal, state, and local level. Obviously, we're still under the 15-day federal guidance for the quarantine or social distancing. Illinois has a stay-at-home order. Obviously, restaurants and bars closed for dine-in. Some are doing carry-out still. We had late last week, an extension of the income tax deadline and the sales tax deadline, so that will mean basically a 90-day cash flow issue for us from a sales tax standpoint. Depending on, I would imagine most businesses would take advantage of that, so. And then obviously we have kind of our big three impacts. Great Wolf, Six Flags, and Gurnee Mills all have been impacted in one way or another, and schools are closed. So that's kind of the headwinds of what we're dealing with, and talk about how that impacts major revenues and how do we measure what that potential impact could be. We ran a bunch of scenarios based on major revenues, so we took what we knew about how consumer behavior is going to change based on what the state or federal, state, and local responses are. And so we looked at sales tax, home rule sales tax, amusement tax, hotel tax, and food and beverage tax. Important thing to note here, amusement, hotel, and food and beverage are local, so we'll see those impacts only 1 month out, whereas sales tax and home rule sales tax will be a 3-month delay, because it's collected by the state and then distributed to municipalities. So we won't know the full impact of what the sales tax and home rule sales tax piece is, but we'll get a pretty good idea from the local taxes that we collect and be able to make some assumptions. Originally, we looked at a 3-month time period, so kind of that March through May time period, and thought, okay, if it's discretionary spending, we should see about a 25% impact, a reduction in that. It's about $1.5 million. Obviously, if that goes up to 50%, so we ran it different scenarios all the way throughout. That's the first chart there. If it's 50% for those 3 months, we get to about $3 million. So that's the range of holes we were looking to fill, so to speak. And then after some developments last week, I just took it out for the whole year. There was different talks about duration of this being 18 months, I heard at one point, all the way to a few months. So that's really an unknown right now. So I just took the fiscal year total and ran that out. 25% there gets us over a $6 million impact if it lasts the whole year, and then obviously 50% is, won't talk about, but it's over 12 million. So different things will have to happen along that. So again, duration is all over the place right now. I'm guessing at the end of this week, we'll get some better guidance once that 15 days up. Watched the press conference before I came to the meeting, and it's still kind of all over the place, but so we'll see. One note, some of these revenue streams, and we talked about it a little bit on the staff level, but based on how we set up rebate agreements, at least recently, protecting the village's base, like if you look at the amusement tax rebate we have out there, we get paid first before anything goes to the rebate. In this situation, we have a little cushion. The rebate acts as a cushion because that'll get eaten up first, and then it'll go into our base. So really, I just wanted to point it out because this is a good example of a time, and we set them up that way intentionally, but it's a good example of a time when that sort of arrangement on a rebate really helps us out, protects our base, so gives us a little cushion there. So this whole scenario is really why we did this a couple years ago now, the Fiscal Contingency Plan. The first piece of the plan is you need to have an event, and we did split that into two parts. An adverse fiscal circumstance is determined by the village administrator. I think this easily qualifies for that. And then 2 consecutive quarters of declines. Obviously, we won't see that for a few months with how sales tax is delayed. That's why we intentionally put those 2 factors in there in case something came up very rapidly like this. We can say this equals a trigger event. What the trigger event does is puts into motion some additional reporting to the board, that we'll talk about in a little bit, but also brings to the forefront something that departments work on throughout the year, and then on the budget process is kind of a list of, next slide, a list of actions that we can take in the event. Obviously, we've been working hard on these over the last few months with the budget process, but came into more focus here in the last month or so. So the actions that we look at, we really break them into, well, I should say they're sorted by 2 factors. Time to realize the benefit. So obviously, if we can take an action that we realize the savings immediately, that's a benefit. Or if it's an action where we won't see the savings for, a year out or a year plus out. The other factor that we look at is the impact operationally. So there may be some actions we can take that don't have any impact operationally, and there's others where we get to looking at service cuts that have obviously a bigger impact operationally. So kind of rank those into 3 tiers. The bottom level there is tier 1, so less severe, if you think of it that way, up to tier 3. So what we did was we took the actions that the departments gave us input on and put them into, put some numbers to them and put them into kind of a few charts here that show tier 1, oh, there we go. The 3 different tiers, so tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3, by fund. So in the general fund, because of how the revenues come in, we basically have to cover 100% of that, 100% of the downturn, whatever that dollar amount may end up being. In the water and sewer fund, there's obviously going to be, if businesses are closed and things happen, there's obviously an impact to the water usage, although people being home might actually increase it. But businesses being closed will obviously have an impact there too, so it remains to be seen. Included it in there to say, hey, here's things we can do in the water fund. So should that come in, but remember that's also offset by a reduction in what we're paying JAWA for the water coming in, so we don't have to cover 100% of the lost revenue there. In the capital fund, a lot of the capital fund is baked in from either prior year surpluses that are transferred, or like this year we had sale of asset last year that is sitting in the fund balance, so spending some of that. Also, home rule sales tax. So we do have to cover whatever the drop in home rule sales tax would be in the capital fund with some sort of expenditure adjustment. So looking at, just walk through a couple of these that were on the list here in the general fund. First couple of things we'd look at, eliminate the capital transfer. If you remember during the budget discussion, we budgeted $675,000 transfer from the general fund to the capital fund because we didn't anticipate having any surplus at the end of this year due to paying off the bonds early. So we budgeted that program in, and for next year, we could eliminate that. In conjunction with that, if you look at the capital side at the top there, we could utilize MFT funds this year to offset that gap. So we cut the $675 from the general fund, that stays in the general fund. Instead of holding all the MFT money for next year and using 2 years at once, we would just use the $800,000. That would fill the gap from the $675. Next line down in the general fund, we have budgeted $300,000 for an economic development reserve. We've done that for the last 3 years. That is something we could take a look at. I didn't count the full $300,000. Left some in there if there were some items we did, so we just took $250 of that as something we could look at. Went through minor capital items. This is stuff that's in operating budgets, not in the capital fund. Went through those and took portions, not 100% of everything, because some of the stuff is more critical than others. But $180,000 we could squeeze out there. And then obviously training schools and meetings and conventions. Again, didn't take 100%. We took 50% of that and said, some training is going to have an operational impact. We'll leave that in. We'll look at reducing it by 50%, and those numbers are $60,000 and $15,000. So Tier 1, just in the general fund, we can get to about 1.2 million. Again, no operational impact, stuff we can do. We'll have a small impact on future year's capital because we're using MFT, obviously, every year instead of doing it every other year, so. Water and sewer fund, deferring capital items, about 545,000. Heather walked through the projects we had out there and what we could delay. Determined those would be the easiest ones to knock off the list. Remaining nulls to IEPA loan. So we have, right now, I was working under the direction for the village to cover the last $1.5 million of the expense for the Knowles Road Tower. The IEPA loan we took out covers the entire thing, but we were going to see where we were and if the water fund could afford it, and so we were working under that guidance. We have about $630,000 left on the IEPA loan, so right now we've had, we've eaten about 800 and some thousand of it that we've paid for out of water and sewer fund reserves. What we could do just to save money, or cash flow in this case, would be to take the last 630, use the IEPA loan, preserve that extra $500,000 or 630 in cash in the water and sewer fund. If it turns out there's no impact to the water and sewer fund, we can always take it and make one principal payment, next year or, whatever we decide to do, but at least it gives us that flexibility. Delay remote read project. This was a project that's been in the budget for a few years now. This is so we can read meters remotely. Right now we drive around in a truck. This would allow us to do it from the desktop here via cellular connections. So we just delay that. That's $300,000. We had programmed in an additional $250,000 for the principal payment and the IEPA loan for the first year. We could not make that payment. And then training in schools, meeting and conventions, the water and sewer fund side of those cuts. The capital fund side, we talked about the MFT. We just went through with Heather on the different systems and looked at what we could easily reduce. Transportation, we found 150, stormwater 150, buildings 122, and then technology about 125. Technology is tricky because there's some departmental kind of wish list items that we could push off, although some of them are enterprise-wide, obviously things like security and stuff like that, cyber security that we had in there, we left that in. So we pushed that to more of a tier 2 type of adjustment. Next tier, so here we have a little bit of operational impact, not as much. Public Works has a slew of contractual services, not just Public Works, there's other departments too, but primarily in Public Works that we could reduce. For example, mosquito abatement, if we halved the rounds, something like that, so I only took 50% of those. That came up to $300,000. Freeze open positions currently, that has some operational impact because there's an overtime impact. And then also, for example, like we have a civil engineer position out there, that has an impact on contracts when it comes to the road program for next year. So netted all that out and got to about $250,000. And then seasonal employees, intern, we could reduce those. Obviously, they're not in positions right now, so that would be no impact to people that are here, $125,000. And then benefit reductions and pay freezes, this would be along the lines of COLAs and like a sick leave buyback program that we could delay or put off there. So obviously that gets into employees' pay and things like that, so you got to be conscious of what the impact of that might be on employee morale. But tier 2 in the general fund, almost 1.4 million there. And then we get into in the water and sewer fund and then the capital fund, more cuts in those projects and get into vehicles and equipment. Did not consider police vehicles until tier 3. Obviously, public works vehicles, they got a longer lifespan, 15, 20 years. 1 year on that lifespan is going to make a big deal. As soon as we start delaying 5 squad cars a year that have a 3-year lifespan, that gets bunched up pretty quick, and we're going to end up paying for it in more ways than one. So I did not include those in there. They do have 2 detective vehicles in there, though, that I did plug in. Some other minor capital stuff in the water and sewer fund, about $160,000, and then in the capital fund again, just over $1 million that we could work on there. So tier 3, this is where it gets a little tougher. These are going to have some operational impacts. Obviously, employees that we have on staff now, that are contractual. We have accounting, plan reviews, code enforcement. So if those contracts cease to exist, obviously there's some impact to what we do operationally. Fully eliminate contractual services, so this would be things like completely eliminate the mosquito program. That gets us another $300,000. And then eliminating training, even the stuff that could have an operational impact, like marijuana training, legalized cannabis training this year, things like that. There's a certain amount of that we have to have. If we eliminate everything we don't have to have, we get a little bit more money there. And then we get into furloughs and layoffs. Obviously, that's hard to quantify without getting into specifics, so just left that at TBD, but another 750 if we had to get into the arena where we're talking about operational impacts. Water and sewer fund, we're kind of made it through all the tier 1 and 2 items, so we get into furloughs and layoffs right away here, and then delaying, a majority of them. Now we're talking about the old Grand Water Main, delaying that project and things like that. And then the capital fund, now we're talking about delaying the whole road program and working on, trying to look at all the capital projects we have and just pushing them off a year. Obviously, that also has a negative impact on future years, and we're going on a rotation, so that's why it's in the tier 3. Even with a 20-year or 23-year, I guess, program that we got funded pay-as-you-go now for roads, that's going to have an impact. So anytime you push off $4 million a year to a future year, it's going to have an impact in finding it in future years too. So sum all that up, in the general fund, we got about $3.3 million. And again, this is just the exercise we go through with the Fiscal Contingency Plan every year. Got about $3.3 million in the general fund, almost $2 million in the water and sewer fund, and then 2.4 in the capital fund. Cuts that we could make if we had to, obviously, start with tier 1 and work from there.
Yeah, and let me just, for the board, if the tools that are available to Brian and Pat right now, tier 1 would cover us if we were looking at a 20% drop for next year. That Pat and Brian's got it under control with just that. A tier 1 and tier 2 combined would be we would need a 30% drop in revenues all of next year. So, I mean, we've got stuff already, they already have tools and contingency and all that, and that they'll manage to. If it goes beyond the 30%, now you're looking at the tier 3 and a lot of other things. But, I mean, just what they just came up, just our existing plan gets us a 20% drop, and tier 2 gets us almost to 30%. So before we'd have to do too much, that's drastic. So, Trustee Hood?
I was just talking to Chief Kavanaugh, and I think that just as you talk, Brian, this isn't something that just came up on an overnight for us. And all the years that we've planned and we have reserves and we've thought about these things, now it's happened. And I appreciate what you're presenting, but I just think from a standpoint of the village, to appreciate that we're in the position we are today because of many years of putting it out like it is today. And that I don't have to be panicked about how things are going to work because I know that things have been planned far in advance when we were in peaceful times. Now that we're in it, we don't have to panic and say, how's it all going to go? Because it's been thought about in peaceful times. And we've hired well. We've got reserves. We've thought through these processes before, and we're going to come out just fine. And I personally don't, the 18 months I think is crazy. I think that we'll find in a few months that we're going to start heading on our way back up, and that we'll take a hit, no doubt. But I think the hit to us won't be anything like what it could have been if we would have been highly leveraged, if we wouldn't have a reserve, if we hired poorly. So as I look at it now, I feel thankful that the position we're in today. And I'm thankful for how you're going through it, because I think this is exactly how we have to look at it. But it's not a plan that you cooked up yesterday.
No.
So
Well,
I appreciate that.
We worked on it every year for the last, 3-4 years, I think. And during the budget process, we meet on this, we meet on this and personnel. So, after we get done meeting, a series of meetings for months, with the departments, we have a really good idea of what levers are out there for us to pull if we need to be able to do things like this. So We
Thank
get a very good picture of it every year. Almost last slide. Just other considerations that we can look at. Fire Station 3 construction and Fire Station 3 funding. I separated those out on purpose so I could have two lines there for Fire Station 3. But, so there's some idea out there that there may be some funding coming for projects, and does it make sense to maybe just pause the Fire Station 3 and see if that comes about? When we had talked during the budget process of funding it, we talked about basically a promissory note or a unsecured loan from Gurnee Bank versus a GO bond. The promissory note at that time was cheaper. That has completely flopped recently here. So again, we have to come back to that. We have a little bit before we have to make that decision, but you know, what's that going to look like in a few months from now? It could change again. So just some things we're looking at. The remaining Knowles Tower we talked about, and then to Trustee Hood's point, the fund balance here, we expect it to be about $26.5 million at the end of the year. And just to put that in perspective, our policy is $15.1 million. Obviously, that gives us somewhere around $11 million. And I think if you looked at the one chart, if we had a 50% impact for the full year, it was $12 million. So that gives you an idea of that fund balance cushion and why it's important, and you know, how far it'll get us if we don't make any other adjustments. So that's an important number. So looking at where we're kind of headed here, we talked about the budget adoption on the 6th. And the way this would work is we adopt the budget, largely what we talked about coming in. The Fiscal Contingency Plan monthly reporting would kick in. We do those at the second meeting because then we'll have sales tax numbers and they can get you the most up-to-date information at the next meeting. In that memo, we'll have an update on what's taken place, what the expected duration is. So, you know, at the end of next week, if we get down to a little bit more honed in on a number there, we'll obviously update the board on that. Any operational or financial impacts, particularly to major revenues. And if there's any responses that staff thinks we need to make at that time, we'll put that in the memo as well. And then, you know, have a time period for board input on anything like that, you know, interaction with staff on any of those proposed responses, and then we would bring those forward as a budget amendment. So at the end of the day, we would have our adopted budget with revenues where we thought they would come in, and then a series of budget amendments that would be responses to what we're doing based on how far down we think revenues are going to go. So in the end, that's a really nice way to track what we did from a standpoint of where we thought we would be, and then steps we took on the expenditure side to fill the gap that's going to ultimately show up on the revenue side. So that's kind of the process that I was looking at, and we had talked about, Pat and I had talked about moving forward here to, I guess, formalize that communication stream.
It's a good idea. Other questions from the trustees? All right, well, because of disposable income and discretionary spending, we know we'll take a bigger hit maybe than some other communities, but we are in a much stronger financial position to absorb that because of all the planning and contingency. So we'll see how this plays out week to week.
Yeah.
Pat?
We've talked to all the department heads, they get it. Employees have asked how this is gonna impact village operations. Obviously getting that debt paid off, the Macy's debt in the pool was huge, freeing up that money. We'll be slowing things down here, the departments know that. Obviously doing a lot more reporting to the village board as we go forward, like Brian said. We'll be able to get a better feel here when our local revenue, our tax returns come in, the food and beverage tax, the amusement tax, that comes to us directly versus flowing through the state. And just, we'll keep the board updated and make adjustments as we need to along the way. But we've got a decent start with the contingency plan. It just depends on how long this drags out and how hard it hits us, so. And then, sure.
I would have a question. So we have the IPED loan in the works or whatever. Does that change with the state then having, do they cut back on those kind of things then also, so that would be in jeopardy, or?
So when we apply for that, they lock the funding and the rate. So when we got approved for it, it was this just over $6 million that we had in the IPA loan, and the rate was locked at 1.82, I want to say. So that can't change. They've already made those adjustments to be able to fund that for us.
That one's good. It's the Manchester Road traffic signal. That's a little more concerning. So, I mean, that's included in the capital budget for the state, but even before this hit, the state had stated that the money isn't coming in as fast as we thought it was coming in, so we're not releasing these grants as fast as we thought we were going to, and that was before COVID-19. So that one's more concerning at this point.
And just on a worst-case scenario, the tier 3 or whatever, are the unions willing to work with the village? Has there any indication?
So, I mean, we're obviously not to a point that we've sat down and talked to them yet, but that would be a discussion that we would be having with them if and when we get to that point. Before we get to that point, I mean, we would see the handwriting on the wall with, we've blown through tier 1 and we're working our way through tier 2. So then we would be sitting down with the different groups and letting them know what we've done to date and what we're thinking going forward and have that talk. I mean, we're a service-oriented organization, and in order to carry out those services, we need employees. So that's why you saw the, you know, looking at the benefits and stuff wasn't at the top of the list, that was further on down. You know, they're the ones that make this operation happen day to day, so we want to try to take care of them the best we can for as long as we can in situations like this, so.
Thank you.
Trustee Ross?
With all the discussion about the federal government providing help, have you heard anything that it would trickle down to cities and villages and?
Not yet. I did submit some letters. So the piece that would possibly help us the most, and I think it's loans anyways, it's not like it's handouts. It's in this one that's being debated now. It's stabilization funds and a couple other things. So it's in the third one, not the first one or the second one. This one that it failed Sunday and it failed today. So the money for cities and counties was in there, and then it was taken out, and it still didn't pass. So now, in fact, I just did another letter. We're trying to get it back in. We have the support of Senator Durbin and Senator Duckworth. They understand that the cities and the counties are the ones on the front line fighting this, or responding to it, and are taking these hits. But again, it was in, it was out, and now it hasn't passed either. So, didn't pass with or without it. I don't know if they were calling it for another vote tonight.
I don't remember. I know the Illinois Municipal League has been a great
Yeah.
advocate on behalf of all the municipalities
Yeah,
across the state. I mean, Brad Cole is there with J.B. Pritzker, the governor,
Yep.
when he's having the press
Yep.
conference. He was on the call today
Yeah.
with Senator Durbin and Duckworth. So he has been the central person for communicating all the concerns from the localities
Yeah,
across the
and
state.
then the Mayor's Metropolitan Caucus has been outstanding. Dave Bennett, and I was on a phone call last night, led by Mayor Lightfoot of the city of Chicago, and she was extremely sincere. She has somebody on her staff that's very involved with the federal legislation, and she was very sincere on the phone yesterday, you know, about working with us and feeding us information and taking our concerns, you know, forward. She wasn't doing it just for Chicago. She recognizes it's the whole region. She was extremely impressive on the phone, this phone call last night. Managing 400 mayors on a conference call isn't easy. But yeah, we have a lot of people working on our behalf, but nothing that I could say, something passed that we may have as another ace. So, but we're on it. We do phone calls and letters, conference calls constantly. So
Yeah,
our legislators have been good. They have all called, reached out. What do you think the impact is? So,
Lake County Health Department's having 2 conference calls every week. Governor's office is having 2 conference calls every week. The Municipal League is setting up conference calls here and there with different senators. Brad Schneider's been having conference calls, so there's been
yeah,
a lot of, right,
Underwood too.
Underwood
And then
communication from the
Durbin and
different
Duckworth
layers.
today, so, so we're included and we're on them. You know, not all of us at the same time, but Jack, Pat, and I, between us, we're on all the calls, as many as we can get. And they've all given us their cell phones and stuff, and So I feel if we're going to get help, we've got the right people elected right now that's going to help us get help.
Well, and I just think that that's hopeful then too, because there are probably a lot of other communities that are in worse shape than we are, but if everybody gets the same amount of help, then we wouldn't have to be at
Yeah.
even tier 2 or tier 3.
Yeah, I know we kind of got caught flat-footed in 2008 with the shovel-ready projects. So this time, I think we'd be in really good shape with shovel-ready projects because we put a lot of time into engineering and the planning with the fire station and stuff. So if that starts materializing, I think we'll be in great shape this time to, take advantage of those much faster than other communities because we have been planning and investing in planning and preparing long-term.
Okay, so Brian talked about the financial. I'll just give you a quick operational from Village Hall and Public Works, and then Chief Smith and Chief Kavanaugh can kind of let you know what's going on in the police and fire departments. So Village Hall, we closed the building down last week to the public, modified staff schedules to encourage physical separation and social distancing. So for example, the finance assistant will come in and work in a half a day, work from home the other half. The IS department, we have one assigned up at Public Works, one maybe at Village Hall or working from home to keep them away from each other in case one gets sick so it doesn't take down the whole division. Same in the back with the inspectors on the engineering side. Public Works has done the same thing. They've really split the department into 3 different shifts. So they've got one shift coming in and working 2 10-hour days, the next shift 2 10-hour days, third shift 2 10-hour days, again, to keep the employee groups separated. So one group in the street department gets sick, you've still got 2 other groups that can get out there and work on the street. So that's been working good. Again, it's kind of a day by day to see how this thing progresses as far as how long we're going to carry that out. Right now, Village Hall is going to be closed to the public throughout the rest of this week. When we get to Thursday or Friday, we'll see kind of where we're at and take it from there. I can tell you, the public realizes that a lot of these services aren't open to the public. The only people that are showing up at Village Hall are the UPS and FedEx guy. A lot of people are making payments either online or just dropping it off at the front drop box. So, like I said, the public realizes that operations have been scaled back. So that's what's going on in Village Hall, Public Works. You want to talk about fire, you going here, there?
As far as the fire department goes, we've locked the buildings down to only essential employees. Our 2 fire inspectors are working from home. They did bring their keys and their equipment home, so they do come direct to the station, pick up cars, respond out, do things, come back, drop their car off, and go back to the house. They don't come in the building. Management analyst has also got a home computer or a department computer at home, so she's keeping up on all our payroll, all our work from that distance, and all the technology that we've invested in is definitely paying off there and working out well. As far as the fire department goes, we averaged about 20 to 21 calls last year during this time period. We're down to about 16 to 17. We've actually seen a decrease in actual emergency responses. Some of those are service-oriented, a little reduction in service-oriented calls. The other thing we're doing, we're working on other modified protocols through our EMS system. So when we respond to someone's home, we're using distance, actual physical distancing, and we're doing a verbal triage of the patient. We're engaging them, talking to them, trying to figure out whether this is a transport that should go or if this is someone that should be really talking to their doctor. So we're not transporting flu cases. We're only taking people who are symptomatic into the hospital that are flu. Now, we're still dealing with our heart attacks and our strokes and the standard calls we are in the background. We're transporting those. But flu cases, we're doing our best to educate the individual. We are then calling the hospital, getting permission to sign what we call AMA, against medical advice. Even though it is medical advice, it's kind of weird, but we are leaving people at home in place. We do leave them with the information. If something changes, breathing, anything starts to compromise, immediately call 911 back, as well as call, our 911 service. I want to kind of lead on them. EMD, they're going through and they're asking the same verbal triage and giving us a good warning what kind of equipment we need to be bringing in with us. We are fortunate here in Gurnee. We planned for this. Protective equipment, you're hearing about the shortages around. I will tell you, I'm feeling good. We're fine here in Gurnee. We are not seeing a shortage. I feel very safely we can go months out having the proper equipment in place. And that was through planning, things we do, same as your budget. We're doing the same thing from emergency response. We planned out in the future. We've got the respirators we need. We have the gloves, the equipment all on hand in our building in a secure spot, so I feel very good with that. The stress on the employees starting to show a little bit though. We're working with them probably as much as anything, working with what it means to go in someone's home, wearing this equipment. We keep doing education reinforcement that we've got you the right equipment, everything's in place. We have transported a positive patient in our ambulance to a hospital, a known positive. That went very well, everything went smooth. We were able to do all the cleaning in the back of the ambulance, got the ambulance back in service while still at the hospital. Hospitals do have the proper supplies there. Once we do take a patient to the hospital, they are replenishing our supplies that were used, which is standard protocol. At the beginning, there was a little question there. Anytime we do transport a potential infected patient, there's a new executive order that was signed in the state of Illinois that we have to be notified of any positive case within 12 hours of the positive result. Well, that sounded like a great thing at first, but the lag time on it right now, talking to Vista, is over 5 days. So we're not actually finding out positive results. The good part is we are using PPE, we're feeling safe. We are sterilizing the ambulance as if it was a positive result every time after those calls. So we're feeling very safe for our employees as far as that goes. We have the equipment and everything we need. At this point, we can go on, as I said, for a few months in this route. Our staffing levels are working right now. We have 2 people who we have on what we're calling Corona A time, which is something that happened at home, not in our building. So they're on 14-day sequestered in their own homes. We're working with them. One of them's about halfway through. The other one just started, and we'll go with that. So our staffing levels are still good. We're actually still allowing vacation time, things along those lines. It's nice. We're getting the employees the rest and everything they need if this goes on for a period of time. So, any questions about the fire department?
How do you sterilize a ambulance?
We 60% alcohol minimal. We actually were able to secure 80% alcohol spray. So we go in, we do a quick spray of all hard surfaces. There's a wipe down. That happens directly we're still at the hospital, so we're returning. So all their protective equipment's in place. It's an actual wiping of all surfaces and their hard surfaces. And then we have special protocols how we wipe down electronics and things like that, so we're not degrading our radios and things like that. But we have all the equipment. The hospitals do have that, as well as we secured some on our own that we carry in the ambulance. We try to use theirs first, though.
Trustee Thorstensen?
The solution that you have adequate solution for a couple months as well?
Yes, we're good on solutions. In the supply chain on alcohol right now with what most of the distilleries are doing, there's lots of 80% alcohol available out there. There's more than we really need at this point. There's different places. The closest one we've been utilizing is in Lake Zurich. That's you're taking alcohol bottles or taking gin, or basically converting it back into 80% alcohol, and we've got bottles that we're able to put in spray bottles, and that's completely checked out by ADPH, CDC, and we're very comfortable using that, and we have plenty.
Thank you, Chief Kavanaugh. I just wanted to take the opportunity to reiterate what's already been said here. But thank you to Mr. Mutz and village staff for the support and the leadership during this time. And on behalf of all of our employees, we just want to say thank you to the village for the security that came with the COVID time. Having employees in place and recognizing that we had time available to them so that they did not have to make the difficult decision of sometimes whether or not they needed to come into work, I think was important for the village to establish that from the very get-go. And we have had employees who have stayed home to take precautions just to protect the organization and their fellow employees. And really, that came with the support and the offer that the village provided on the COVID time. So thank you to everybody that was involved in that decision. Real quickly, just to kind of bring you up to speed with where the police department is at, we have run the numbers comparing us, our call volume this week, last year, the previous years, and we are down about 32% on calls. And I think that's to be somewhat expected. But we're also seeing a reduction of the number of vehicles in town as well. And so that's something else we look at without getting into too many of the details. The vehicular traffic in town, as of this weekend, was down about 12% as well. And so we're seeing, obviously with the closure of some of the businesses and some of the larger businesses and the main businesses in town, we're seeing a decline that is respectful to that. And so the police department's making adjustments as needed. As Chief Kavanaugh mentioned, I think the village was on top of this from early on, and we also implemented significant restrictions within our building. We closed our building down to all but essential staff. We segregated or put in place limits, if you will, departments within the organization, so that patrol would no longer go into communications. We wouldn't enter records, vice records, communications, and so we've separated all of the departments within the village and tried to reduce any possible interaction there. We also implemented schedule splitting early last week. Investigations did that, where we split who was in the building when they were in the building. The rest were working at home. Records did the same thing. And we have now gotten to the point to where, quote, all of our non-essential staff are no longer working. And so records is working from home. They're no longer working in the building. Our administrative staff is working from home, as well as the support personnel that are essential but aren't defined as essential. And so we have a reduced amount of staff in the building as it is. And then furthermore, on Friday, we increased that even more. The officers no longer are doing shift changes. They don't come together and congregate anymore. They work in their squad cars. They don't come in the building unless there's a need. We also have implemented a number of other precautions with PPEs and call handling. So just so the board is aware, unless there's an emergency response needed for a police officer, we're taking phone reports now. And so that has been successful. I think we've done a decent job getting that word out. The officers are respectful to the community or to the needs when they're explaining why we're no longer coming and having face-to-face contact. And so we've implemented a number of procedures very early on that I think has helped us move forward. As mentioned earlier, we do also have 2 staff that are home on COVID-A time, which is a family member that is being quarantined as a precaution, no positive test. However, they are being quarantined as a precaution for signs and symptoms. We have one that is a little bit more than halfway through, and the other one that's about 3/4 of the way through. And so, again, that comes with the support of the village and being able to keep those employees out of the building and not infective to the rest of staff. As far as procedures go, there has been a reduction in proactive traffic enforcement. We've put a lot of rules in place, a lot of guidance, if you will, for our contact with the community. We are still responding. We're still making arrests when required and when necessary. We're still making traffic stops when that too is necessary. Obviously, the protocols for social distancing and personal hygiene have been reiterated over and over again. Each officer has a PPE go bag that they carry with them, and every one of our squad cars has Clorox wipes, hand sanitizer, And we too disinfect our vehicles and our equipment at the end of each shift. So they do it at the beginning, they do it again at the end. We have a wash down or a disinfection station built into one of our sally ports, where if there's a suspect interaction with a contaminated or a sick person, we have a protocol in place where the officers will come in and decontaminate themselves, and then eventually take a shower, put on a new uniform, and their equipment all gets decontaminated as well. And then our uniforms, the fire department has been nice enough to wash our uniforms in their machines that have the proper temperature and the proper detergent to make sure that they're disinfected. So thank you, Chief, for that. I know that's been employed a few times now. And so we feel as though we have the right procedures in place. We have plenty of equipment. I'd like to take the opportunity to thank our partners within the community. We have received a number of donations from businesses and other community members with supplies that they no longer needed. And so they reached out to us to see if we could use them. And so we are using those supplies. We've also put in requests through our proper chains, through IEMA and Lake County Health, for additional supplies when those do become available. But as Chief Cavanaugh mentioned, I think we have enough supplies on hand for at least a month of this. And then between the two of us, I think we can help each other out if we saw a need for something that we didn't have available.
You want to talk about what you got going on with dispatch quick?
Sure, thank you. So one of the things that obviously we're concerned with is the dispatch center. They work together inside, semi-close confines with each other for 12 hours at a time. And so we have, last week, as pre-scheduled, something we do every year, it just happened to be the timing of this, was the deep clean. And that is an outside contractor service that comes in and completely sanitizes the communications center. That just so happened to be that was scheduled back in January. And the sanitation that took place was last Monday, 2 Mondays ago, right at the outbreak of this. And so we're separated people as far as we can separate them inside the dispatch center. We have all of the recommended social distancing and personal hygiene rules in effect. We are now working on establishing a dual dispatch center. And so we're moving 2 of the dispatch locations down into the training room. And we will have a dispatch center downstairs and a dispatch center upstairs, which we will split the dispatchers, and we will assign people to training room, and we'll assign them to the regular comm center, and that's where they'll work for the duration of this event. And that is to reduce the likelihood of a mass contamination, if you will. But also, if one of the centers were to go down and need to be disinfected, we have a backup in place already. And so we have started that process. Hope to have it done by Wednesday or Thursday of this week. And so that's where we're at with the communications center. As far as staffing goes, we have a number of plans in place, operational plans in place for the police department, and we will be implementing one of those sometime this week. And so that will further reduce the contact that officers have with each other and the breakdown of the teams. And so we will go from 4 patrol teams to 10 patrol teams, and only one of those teams will be working at a time. And so that will help us also perhaps starve off a cross-contamination amongst those teams. And so those, again, I think the staff has been really good. Obviously, they've been alarmed with this, just like a lot of people have. We're dealing with it. Everybody seems to be pretty solid. We're providing support where we can, and they recognize that, and they too are very appreciative. We've gotten a lot of feedback from both of our union groups in response to the time that was provided by the village early on up front to reduce the stressors of being sick and/or schools closing. And that feedback we've gotten is we're in a really good place because of that, and not all of the other organizations out there are feeling the same. So we're very lucky, and thank you to everybody.
Yeah, and I would just end on saying that Chris Velker and his team have been great throughout this. I mean, they're working to get more people set up to work from home. They ordered another slew of laptops last week and are working to get those set up. They're working to have village phones at the main counter ring at people's houses, and people will be able to use their personal computers at home and get into the village's system. Obviously, they're testing that with some IS employees and make sure that it's safe and stuff. But they've put in a ton of time and effort to get more people set up than already were set up, which was a good number of people to work from home. So they've definitely helped keep this operation going from that standpoint.
Welcome to the private sector.
Can I,
Outstanding planning, prep, all the considerations. So good job. Glad we have the team that we do. Trustee Bowman?
and have we, because I'm not a computer person and that, I mean, have we instituted that cyber whatever? I mean, with all this working at home, makes me real nervous.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the people working at home right now are on village-issued laptops that have all the necessary security features in place. Chris and his team have been working to send out reminders because with the increase in this, obviously the increase in scams via email and stuff have risen. So they sent out a reminder, Friday? Yeah, last Friday, about what to look for. Like I said, a lot of the stuff that they're working on getting set up that wasn't currently in place, they're working with Eric Venden, our GIS coordinator, as part of the IS department, to run it through him first to make sure it's going to work and then roll it out slowly. So they're definitely taking a methodical and very cautious approach to getting that set up.
And the staff is well aware of all of that too. Okay. I wouldn't know, but I'm glad they all know.
Other questions? Trustee Hood?
Not a question, but I guess in looking at this, it would be asking the question, how could we have better prepared so that when it happens next time, and there will be a next time, what would we have changed? And if the answer is nothing, great, but just to keep track of the different things that we're doing now, that again, in peacetime, that we can set up, so just to pay attention. And like I said, I just think we're in a great spot, but nonetheless, I think we could always be in a better spot if we see what didn't work this time, then change it, you know, so, but so far, so good.
Okay. All right, so that's all our financial and our crisis management, risk management right now. So we have no old business, so we're going to move on to new business. The first is approval of ordinance 2020-17,
17.
authorizing the execution of a water service agreement between the Village of Gurnee and Christian Kayat, owner of El Rancho Motel and Fat Man Inn, at 36355 and 36309 North Highway 41.
Sure. So the owner of Fat Man's and El Rancho approached us. He's going to be going through a remodel and expansion of the Fat Man Inn, which is going to trigger the installation of fire suppression sprinklers within the building. He's currently in the county. Instead of installing water storage tanks and fire pumps, he reached out to us to see if he could connect to the village's water system in a similar manner to what he did with the sanitary sewer back in 2009. Also asked about annexing into the village. Bringing those two properties in isn't something that we're interested in at this time, but we are okay with him connecting to our water system to be able to provide more reliable fire suppression systems within the Fat Man Inn for those that are in there. We have some other agreements in place similar to this. Obviously, he'd be on the hook for extending the water main, all those costs. And then when you're outside of the Village of Gurnee and connected to our system, you pay 150% of the water rate, so there is an upcharge on the water rate. Like I said, we've got a couple of other properties that are outside the village that we provide water to, so this isn't really anything new. the village board approves it, it'll have to go in front of our water provider, CLC Jowell, so that'll be the final okay on this. We have the capacity in the system, obviously, helps him out, and it's another water customer for us. As you heard Brian say, water sales have been down, continue to go down, just in general across the market, so any extra customers we can pick up, especially if they're gonna pay a 50% upcharge, that's good for us.
Any questions?
I do.
Trustee Balmas?
If, you said we're not interested in annexing them. If we had annexed them, then the costs would have been ours, or,
How does that work if we brought them in?
So what, if we were to annex them, they would still be responsible for extending the water mains, they just wouldn't pay the 50% upcharge.
I mean, they've got
And-
some things up there, the video gaming that they're interested in and such that we don't allow, so there's, right, a little bit
so
of
they're
disconnect
not
between.
necessarily interested either in annexing because
Exactly.
of that. Okay.
And there is a trigger within the agreement that if they do redevelop the site, we have another shot at annexing them at that point.
Okay. All right, thank you. I make a motion to approve.
I had a question.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. I'll call for discussion. Trustee Garner?
So, as
I'm
I
sorry.
understand it, our interest is fire suppression and an upcharge on the water.
The fire suppression would be required anyway for him, based on his expansion. This way, he's just connected to a water main versus having storage tanks outside his facility with pumps that would trigger. So he's got that constant pressure from our system.
Okay.
All right, I have a motion and a second. Roll call, please, Andy.
Thomas.
Aye.
Hood.
Yes.
Thorstenson.
Yes.
Ross.
Aye.
Garner.
Aye.
O'Brien.
Aye.
6 aye.
All right, motion carries. Item number 2, approval of ordinance 2020-18, authorizing execution of a professional services agreement with IMEG for engineering services for the 2020 street maintenance program.
Sure. I think this is the third or fourth year in a row that we brought this forward. During our street maintenance program in the summertime, we bring on contractual assistance to help out our engineers. We've worked with IMEG in the past, same price as last year, bringing the same employee back, so knows how we operate, has worked out well for us. This is, we only pay for what we use, so if we end up scaling back the capital program, it won't be the $124,800 is included in the proposed budget. So we're looking for your approval. And like I said, we only pay for what we use, so.
Questions? Motion from trustee Thorstenson,
Second.
second from trustee Ross. Roll call, please, Andy.
Thomas.
Aye.
Hood.
Yes.
Thorstenson. Ross.
Aye.
Garner.
Aye.
O'Brien.
Aye.
6 aye.
All right, motion carries. Item number 3, approval of ordinance 2020-19, authorizing execution of an intergovernmental agreement between Lake County Stormwater Management Commission and the Village of Gurnee for the 2018 IDNR-OWR Flood Mitigation Program.
So SMC was able to come through with another round of grants that they've acquired for the demolition of homes in the special flood area. So this grant is for 2 homes on Kilbourne and then 1 on McClure Eastville Plain. Typically, we're on the hook for 25% of the acquisition, removal and restoration. This time around, that's down to 5%, so that was nice to see. So our cost related to the acquisition and removal of these 3 structures will not exceed $27,148. We did include the appropriate funding in the budget. The 2018 number, as I listed in my notes, don't let that fool you. This is for new properties that we haven't acquired yet. Those that we're currently wrapping the process up on right now are from 2017. So there's a couple-year delay in this. So in 2022, we'll see these properties perhaps come down.
It's all right. It's slow but steady progress.
Yeah.
All right, questions?
Yeah.
Trustee
Is
Balmas?
this the new properties that you're looking to get, or the properties that are in the process right now that, because I thought this was not supposed to, we weren't gonna have to, the village was not going to have to pay for the demolition. I thought that was in that
The
grant.
additional grant they got, was that for the three that are going on right now? Or is it for this?
It was, the one that's going on right now, there was an additional 75% grant, and then there was an additional 20% grant that brought it basically to the 5% local share.
Oh, I see.
So this one has that same dual grant built into it, so we're just seeing the agreement for us responsible for that 5%.
Okay.
But these are 3 additional homes to the ones that are currently going through now.
Three additional?
Yeah, these are 3 more.
3 more
What?
beyond the program that your home was involved in. So we've got another round coming.
What ones, do you know?
They have not
Or
been,
can I can't?
they've not been approached yet.
Oh, okay.
Individually, they've all voluntarily added their names to the list, but they've not been approached yet. That's why all the names and addresses have been redacted out.
Yeah.
This is just
I
the
wondered about
beginning
that.
of a 3-year process.
Pardon me?
This is just the beginning of a 3-year process.
Oh, that's fine. I can vote on this, right? Okay.
Yeah, this is not yours.
This is not yours.
Okay.
This is for the next round.
Okay.
Second.
I have a motion from trustee Thorstensen, second from trustee Ross. Roll call, please.
Thomas.
Aye.
Hood.
Yes.
Thorstensen.
Yes.
Ross.
Aye.
Garner.
Aye.
O'Brien.
Aye.
6-5.
All right, motion carries. So item 4 through 7
David is gonna
are
run
all
through
the
those quick.
same, is all kind
Yeah.
of under the same umbrella. So I'm going to let David go through them, and then I'll call each one for a vote. Okay? All right, so David, all yours.
Thank you. The first one, ordinance 2020-20, is for a modification to the zoning ordinance pertaining to vehicle repair services, minor and major. Basically, there's a requirement within the zoning code currently that requires screening around repair facilities, vehicle repair facilities, even when they're adjacent to additional repair facilities, adjacent to industrial properties, things like that. The practical application didn't really make sense in circumstances where it was a equivalent or more intense zoning district that we should be requiring screening. So the proposed amendment takes that screening requirement out when the adjacent property is equal or more intensely zoned. And it was unanimously recommended by the Planning and Zoning Board.
Yeah, keep going, and
Keep
then I'll
going,
just
okay.
call them all.
The next one, ordinance 2020-21 and 2020-22 are some modifications to our home occupation ordinance. The first one pertains to massage and landscape business uses. Currently, we only have one exception to home occupations, 2 exceptions to home occupations in our current zoning code. This one would establish additional prohibitions of massage establishments being operated in a private residential home. We felt that since there are significant setbacks requirement, buffers required for commercial massage establishments from residential uses, we felt it not appropriate to have massage uses embedded into a residential subdivision. So that one was recommended for approval 5-1 by the Planning and Zoning Board. The next one is landscape businesses. There are some provisions already within the zoning code that limit the outdoor storage of landscape materials, that limit the ability to store and outside equipment facilities for landscape businesses. This just further clarifies it and specifically lists it as a prohibited use as a home occupation. So the massage establishment was recommended for approval as a prohibition by 5-1 at the PZB. The landscape business prohibition was recommended for approval as 6-0 by the PZB. The
May I ask a question? On the landscape one?
Okay, sure. Go ahead.
On the landscape one, if the person can get their truck completely in their garage, then that's allowed because, but if it's outside, then it's not?
That is correct.
Okay.
You know, all equipment, machinery has to be stored indoors, as well as any landscape materials, you know, piles of mulch, things like that, that would all have to be stored interior, so completely hidden from the public view. Okay. The third home occupation that was discussed was for astrology, card, and palm reading or fortune telling. This one, based upon the village's experience, relies heavily upon signage, relies heavily upon drive-by customers. This was proposed. We found a couple of examples where it was listed as a prohibited home occupation in the Chicagoland area. The Planning and Zoning Board felt that if they were to operate in a legal manner underneath our sign code and other aspects, that they felt it did not warrant any additional regulation or prohibition. So they ended up giving a 3-3 non-recommendation as a final vote on that aspect. Yes?
Does that mean the neon signs in the window would be prohibited then?
The current standards for home occupations in residential districts limits you to 2 square feet, non-illuminated signs. So that would be the standard that would be applied for any psychic palm readers that would be located in the village.
And it would also prohibit the vans parked out with psychic.
We have standards that if it's along a major village roadway, that any vehicle that has markings on it that the village the zoning administrator deems as being used as a sign, those would be prohibited as well.
Thank you.
Question on that one.
Trustee Thorstensen?
It's stated in the PZB notes on page 3 that, in the last sentence, that it was Ms. Delco noted that Gurnee did have a psychic reader in the past operating out of a home along Grand Avenue. So is the one that I usually give some other resident input to you, Pat, the one that's being stated here?
No. The previous one, they were farther down towards 21. That was actually an incorporated parcel. The one that's currently operating now is in an unincorporated donut hole in our corporate boundaries.
Oh, that one on Grand there by Six Flags is in
Unincorporated.
Thank you.
Okay, and then the final zoning code amendment that is being proposed, we found an inconsistency in some of our signage regulations as they refer to neon LED tubing outside of the sign face in the C3 zoning district. So we had it both as a special use permit required and as a prohibited use. So this basically cleans up that language and allows it to be a special use permit under the proposed language. And with that concludes the 4 zoning text amendments for your consideration.
We have to do them one at a time. All right, item number 4, approval of ordinance 2020-20, granting a zoning text amendment pursuant to Article 8.2.32, vehicle repair service, minor and major of the Gurnee zoning ordinance. Motion to approve, trustee Thorstensen.
Second.
Second by trustee O'Brien. Roll call, please, Andy.
Balmas.
Aye.
Hood.
Yes.
Thorstensen. Ross.
Aye.
Garner.
Aye.
O'Brien.
Aye.
6 aye.
Motion carries. Item number 5, approval of ordinance 2020-21, granting a zoning text amendment pursuant to Article 10.2.12, home occupation of the Gurnee zoning ordinance regarding massage and landscape business uses.
So moved.
Motion by trustee Balmas.
Second.
Second by trustee Garner. Roll call, please, Andy.
Balmas.
Aye.
Hood.
Yes.
Thorstensen. Ross.
Aye.
Garner.
Aye.
O'Brien.
Aye.
6 aye.
Motion carries. Item number 6, approval of ordinance 2020-22, granting a zoning text amendment pursuant to Article 10.2.12, home occupation of the Gurnee zoning ordinance regarding astrology, card, and palm reading or fortune-telling uses.
So moved.
Motion by trustee Balmas, second by trustee O'Brien. Roll call, please, Andy.
Balmas.
Aye.
Hood. Yes. Thorstenson.
Yes.
Ross.
Aye.
Garner.
Aye.
O'Brien.
Aye.
6 ayes.
All right, motion carries. Item number 7, approval of ordinance 2020-23, granting a zoning text amendment pursuant to Article 13.15.1, signs requiring special use approval of the Gurnee zoning ordinance. Motion to approve.
So moved.
Trustee Ross. Second by trustee Garner. Roll call, please, Andy.
Balmas.
Aye.
Hood.
Yes.
Thorstenson. Ross. Garner.
Aye.
O'Brien.
Aye.
6 ayes.
All right, motion carries. Before I call for public comment, I'm going to direct Pat and Brian tomorrow. A lot of confusion over essential and non-essential businesses and who can be open and who can't be open, and we are getting people's personal opinion about what should be and not be, and there is some different, it's not a black and white authority that, you know, the Gurnee PD can just go in and shut someone. There's some caveats to it that Pat was explaining to me this afternoon. I think it would be good if we could summarize it, just very briefly for the board, so if they're stopped and somebody questions why PetSmart's open or why a car dealer's open, they have a short, concise answer, please. Okay? It's very confusing. All right, that's all of our business. I will open the floor to the public, which none is present, so I'll close the floor. Do I have a motion to adjourn? Motion by trustee Balmas, second by trustee Garner. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We're done.